The police slammed the evidence bag onto the table, Mrs. Lynn's jade brooch glinting inside. Patricia's trembling voice echoed, "I was only testing the neighborhood's safety," and Vanessa rose to her feet, fire in her chest. "No, you were testing how fast we'd condemn an innocent man." The afternoon light pulled across Vanessa's kitchen tile like warm honey, but she couldn't settle. Emails blurred, client messages stacked into cliffs she couldn't climb, and every so often she'd glance up to see Marcus on the ladder, cutting a clean line along the eaves with the kind of patience you only learn by doing a thing 1,000 times. His t-shirt clung to his back, and even from the window she could see the steadiness of his breathing, the care he took to catch a drip before it wandered. She told herself the pull she felt was respect for craftsmanship. She told herself a lot of things lately. Her phone buzzed. "You good?" First contractor since everything. Vanessa stared at the screen, thumb hovering. "Me fine. He's professional. A beat." Professional doesn't mean unsafe, but fear isn't the same as wisdom either. You know the difference better than anyone. Vanessa set the phone down like it was hot. "Fear isn't wisdom," she murmured, tasting the words. Somewhere out on Maple Ridge, a lawnmower kicked to life. In the family room, Sophie's reading voice drifted in. She liked to read aloud when she thought no one was listening. On the driveway, a sharp crack snapped the quiet, a branch slapping the curb. The old maple on the property line had shed a limb, and the piece lay partly in the street. Before Vanessa could move, Marcus hopped off the ladder, jogged over, and shouldered the weight to the grass. He paused at the base of the neighbour's mailbox, Mr. Green, a widower with a stubborn knee, then knocked gently on the door. A minute later, Marcus had a rake in hand, pulling leaves from the storm drain so the next rain wouldn't flood the cul-de-sac. Patricia materialized on her front walk as if summoned by the sound of civility. "Vanessa," she called, voice pitched to carry. "Do you know he's on Green's side now? Scope creep is how it starts." Vanessa walked to the porch. "He's moving a branch, Pat, not annexing property." Patricia's smile didn't lift her eyes. "We have standards. Contractors should be supervised and vetted." She held up a stapled packet, HOA safety bulletin. "We've had package thefts. A black pickup appears in a few doorbell videos." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "What date?" Patricia flipped pages. "Last night, 9:20 p.m. It's noon." Vanessa fought to keep her voice even. "Marcus arrived at 9 this morning. A truck in a frame isn't a person in a crime." Patricia sniffed. "Perception is community currency." She lowered her voice. "Children play here." Across the street, Marcus finished his tidy pile and returned the rake to Mr. Green's stoop. The old man lifted a hand in thanks. Marcus touched his cap in answer and headed back without looking toward the porch, as if he hadn't heard any of it, as if hearing wasn't his responsibility. The refusal to eavesdrop read like dignity. Vanessa stepped down onto the driveway as he returned. "Thank you for clearing that," she said. "Didn't want a tire to catch it," he replied. "Drain was clogged. Would have backed up." "Still, thanks." He nodded and climbed the ladder. The brush moved. A line became a cleaner line. Vanessa watched the way he checked the edge, traced it again. He worked like a man who'd promised himself something long ago and kept the promise in small ways, even when no one was looking. A brown UPS truck turned onto Maple Ridge and rolled to the curb in front of her house. The driver hopped down with 2 boxes. "Morning," he said to Vanessa, then glanced up at Marcus. "Hey, Reed, back at it." Marcus grinned. "You know it." "You did my mom's porch last spring," the driver told Vanessa. "Straight shooter." He pivoted to the steps, dropped the packages, snapped a photo, and was gone before she could reply. The coincidence landed like a hand on her back, gentle, urging. Her phone pinged again, this time the Maple Ridge neighbor's thread popping like hot oil. "Did you see the truck at Vanessa's?" "Keep eyes open, folks. Ring shows black pickup. Same shape." Vanessa stared at the screen until the words unfocused. Then she clicked the microphone and held it to her lips before doubt could muzzle her. "It's my contractor," she said to the group. "His name is Marcus. He's painting my garage and just cleared Mr. Green's drain so your basements don't flood. Try saying thanks." She hit send. The bubble pulsed. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Hesitation rendered as punctuation. A police cruiser turned into the street a few minutes later, slow as a thought no one wants to say aloud. The blue stripes slid past hedges and hydrangeas, then idled near the curb by her driveway. 2 officers inside. One rolled the window down part way. "Morning," the driver said, watching Marcus through polarized lenses. Vanessa felt her pulse climb her throat. She walked forward before Patricia could. "Can I help you?" "Received a call about a suspicious vehicle," the officer said. Vanessa forced her breath to even. "That suspicious vehicle is my contractor's truck. He's on a job I hired him for. You're welcome to see the work order." Her voice came out calm, level, older than she felt. The second officer glanced at Marcus. "Sir, do you have ID?" Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, climbed down, and reached for his wallet with a practiced, slow clarity that made Vanessa's heart hurt. "Back pocket," he said aloud, each motion narrated. He held the license between two fingers. "Marcus Reed," the driver read. "Address checks." His gaze flicked to the ladder, the drop cloths, the paint codes taped to the can. "You have a permit for the extension ladder?" Marcus blinked. "A permit for an 8-foot ladder?" The younger officer flushed. "It's fine," he muttered, handing back the license. "Just checking." Vanessa heard herself say, "Officer, who made the call?" "We can't disclose that, ma'am," the driver said, already rolling his window up, the cruiser easing forward. "Of course you can't," she whispered to the disappearing taillights. Behind her, Patricia studied a bush that didn't need studying. Marcus climbed back up without comment. The brush whispered against wood. Wind patted the flags on 3 porches. Somewhere a dog barked once and thought better of it. Vanessa stepped closer to the ladder's base. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" His tone was neutral, not unkind. "For living somewhere where a man moving a branch and painting a wall gets a patrol car." She swallowed. "For letting my fear talk before I did." He looked down then, eyes steady, something like wariness tucked behind them, something like patience too. "Fear's loud," he said. "It earned its volume. But it doesn't always deserve the mic." She huffed a small laugh. "Mine's had a microphone and stage lighting." She hesitated. "If you need to use the bathroom, use the one inside. It's cleaner. I trust you." The last 3 words landed like stones dropping into a well, true enough to echo. He dipped his chin. "Thank you," he said simply, and when he returned to the work, the set of his shoulders had changed a degree, as if a weight had been shifted ever so slightly from one side to the other. Sophie appeared on the porch, a marker-splotched sheet of printer paper in her hands. She hovered near Vanessa's hip. "Can I give him this?" "What is it?" "It's our house," she said, "and him on the ladder, and me not falling." She pointed at 3 stick figures and a rectangle with eyes. The truck had lashes. "I made his truck pretty," she added, conspiratorial. Vanessa smiled despite herself. "Ask him, honey." Sophie trotted to the ladder, head tilted up. "Mr. Marcus, I drew you something." He came down again, so many up and downs today, and crouched to her level. "Let's see." He studied the paper as if it were a blueprint to a future. "This is perfect. You're a real artist." Sophie rocked on her heels with a grin that showed the gap where a tooth had been. "You can have it." He looked to Vanessa for permission. She nodded. He folded the paper carefully, like you fold something that matters. "You know," he told Sophie, "this corner will dry in an hour. Want to see how we check for tackiness without messing up the paint?" She looked at Vanessa again. Vanessa managed a little wave. 2 minutes. No touching the wall. They stood together and he showed Sophie how to test a hidden patch with the back of a knuckle. "See? Feels cool? Not ready. Warm and dry? Ready for coat too." Sophie nodded solemnly, as if inducted into a guild. Something in Vanessa's chest softened, a zipper undone after a day too long spent holding yourself in. By 4:30 the second coat had turned the garage into a thing reborn. The colour, a gentle slate with a hint of blue, seemed to pull the whole house into a clearer version of itself. Marcus cleaned his brushes at the edge of the drive, spun water from a roller, snapped the frame shut. He made order as he made beauty. The two seemed braided in him. Vanessa brought out a glass of water with lemon and a plate with 3 fig cookies. Sophie loved. He accepted one, broke it in half and tucked the other into a napkin. "For later." "Do you ever stop moving?" she asked, a smile trying itself out on her mouth. He wiped a bead of water from the handle of a brush. "Stopped once," he said lightly. "Didn't like the view." The joke was gentle, but the shadow behind it was real. "What changed it?" "My grandmother," he said. "She used to say, if your hands can fix a thing, let them. If your voice can calm a room, lend it. If your feet can carry you toward someone who needs you, walk. She made sermons out of chores. He looked at the wall. I guess I'm still listening. Vanessa's throat tightened. I had a father who could make anything grow, she said. When he got sick, I learned how to pretend I wasn't afraid. She let the confession sit between them. Pretending is exhausting. Truth takes less air, he said. Not soft, not hard, just true. Sophie barreled out the door with her backpack and soccer ball. Coach says I can play forward if I practice more shots. Mr. Marcus, do you think I can? I think you already decided you can, he said. The rest is just reps. They laughed, and it felt shockingly natural. On Maple Ridge, someone closed a grill lid. Somewhere, a sprinkler ticked to life. The day tilted toward evening. As Marcus loaded the last of his tools, Vanessa realized she didn't want him to leave. Not abruptly, not like a lesson cut short. She stood there, a woman who had curated a whole life of appearances, deciding in real time to let something uncurated happen. Marcus, she said, before the fear could clear its throat. He turned, patient, present. If you're free tomorrow, I have a back deck rail that needs mending. It's not urgent. She stopped. Truth takes less air. I'd like the help, and the company doesn't make the day worse. He smiled, small, surprised, grateful but not greedy. I can swing by after my morning job, around 2. 2 is perfect. He climbed into the truck, set Sophie's drawing on the dash, and tapped it twice with 2 fingers. Tell your artist I'll bring it back framed. Then he drove away, taillights winking once at the end of the street. Vanessa stood in the driveway with her daughter's hand in hers, looking up at the fresh slate wall, feeling something matching it inside her. Primer down, first coat dry, ready for what came next. By morning, the new paint had cured into a soft slate that made the white trim blink awake, and Vanessa found herself lingering at the window like someone waiting for good news. At 1:58, the black pickup eased to the curb. Marcus stepped out with a carpenter's tote and a coil of sandpaper, the sun catching the tiny flecks of dried paint on his forearms. Sophie beat Vanessa to the door. You came back, Sophie announced, backpack slung on one shoulder, ponytail slightly crooked. Promised I'd check that rail, he said, lifting the tote, and I brought something. He held up a slim black frame. Inside, Sophie's drawing. The house, the ladder, a truck with eyelashes. Sophie's gasp could have blown dandelions bald. Mom! He framed it. Vanessa's laugh surprised her with how unguarded it sounded. Come on around, she said, leading him through the side gate to the deck. The back garden blushed with late summer, basil overreaching its pot, tomatoes flirting with orange. Marcus crouched at the loose baluster and ran a thumb along a hairline split. Old screws. Wood swelled, pulled them proud. He glanced up. Does your father's drill still live in the garage? He does, she said, then added, did, because accuracy mattered to grief. I'll grab it. When she came back, Sophie had set 2 lemon waters on the steps like offerings and was quizzing Marcus about soccer positions. He listened as if every 8-year-old's thought was a blueprint to be respected. Vanessa watched the way attention sat on him, steady, uncomplaining, like a tool he'd learned to carry without tiring. He set new screws, clamped the rail, sanded until the splinter edge turned to silk. Vanessa stood near, unnecessarily holding the umbrella pole for shade that didn't need holding. She could smell his soap under the sawdust, a clean, practical thing. You work like someone taught you by hand, she said. My grandmother, he answered. She believed in repairs. People, houses, the tiny hinge on the bread box. If you throw it away before you try, she'd say, you'll do that to yourself too. Vanessa nodded, eyes on the line where sanded wood met old stain. Fear had taught her to throw things away. Spontaneous laughs, invitations from friends, men who were kind but not bulletproof enough for the life she had to defend. Repairs felt like faith. Maybe that was why watching him calm her. He straightened, wiped dust from his palms, and tested the rail with a careful shake. Solid, give it a day before Sophie plays jungle gym. Copy that, Vanessa said. Then, before caution could close her mouth, she heard herself ask, why are you still single? The question hung there like a bird deciding whether to land. Sophie had tiptoed away to the tomato bed. The yard was a green hush. Marcus didn't flinch. He held her gaze the way he held tools, steady, without pretense. I don't collect maybes, he said. Tried once, paid in pieces of myself, learned I'd rather be alone than somebody's project or mask. Vanessa's chest pricked. "I know about masks," she said softly. "This neighborhood gives them out at closing." He smiled, not gloating, not coy. "What about you?" She could have said it was complicated. She could have said work, Sophie, the house, the 1,000 demands. Truth takes less air. "I married safety, and it turned out to be a costume," she said. "Now I'm allergic to costumes." His eyes warmed, but he didn't step closer and he didn't step away. He nodded, like two people had just said real things, and that was enough. The gate latch clicked. Patricia, as if conjured by the possibility of vulnerability, appeared with a covered platter. "Brought snickerdoodles," she announced. "Left over from the committee. We had to reschedule the block party meeting." "Oh!" She performed surprise at seeing Marcus. "You're still here." "Finishing a rail," he said. Patricia's gaze skimmed the screws like they might misbehave. "We do prefer licensed carpenters for structural." "It's 3 balusters, Pat," Vanessa said, "and my deck." "Well, as HOA president, I'm just concerned." Her smile hardened. "We've had reports, suspicious activity, a porch theft. I told the officers I'd keep an eye." "We all have eyes," Vanessa said. "Let's use them to see." Patricia's eyes flicked to the framed picture resting on the step. She tilted her head. "How sweet." Her tone made sweet mean naive. She set the cookies down like a summons and retreated with a garden club wave. Marcus exhaled once through his nose, a private joke at a world that wouldn't stop being itself. "I'm going to help Mrs. Lynn with her gutter after lunch," he said. "It's been overflowing. I can knock it out in 20. "Mrs. Lynn?" Vanessa asked. "2 houses over, blue shutters," he said. "She was worried last week. Fixed her downspout bracket yesterday when I left here." Vanessa remembered the drain, the branch, the small ways he made order. You don't bill for 20-minute kindness. "My grandmother would haunt me," he said lightly. But his smile said the ethic ran deeper than ghosts. He packed his tote, promised Sophie a tomato taste test next time, and disappeared through the gate. Vanessa watched him cross the grass of 2 backyards as if belonging wasn't a question he asked. She wanted that for herself, suddenly and with sharp clarity, to move through Maple Ridge as if belonging were an act you performed until it became true. She was assembling a late lunch when her phone started rattling with notifications. Maple Ridge neighbors lit up in frantic bursts. "Anybody know the guy on Ash Lane yesterday?" "Mrs. Lynn's jewelry is missing." "Saw a black pickup around lunchtime. Police en route." Vanessa's stomach went cold. She texted Mrs. Lynn directly. "You okay?" A moment later, 3 dots. Then, "They say my grandmother's jade brooch gone. I let Marcus check the attic crawl. Need to see if water leak. Police want to talk to you." Vanessa didn't think. She grabbed keys, called to Sophie to stay inside and lock the door, and jogged the 2 houses to Mrs. Lynn's, sun snapping at her shoulders. 2 squad cars idled, engines humming, the house door ajar. Inside, Mrs. Lynn stood small and fierce in the living room, a tissue clenched in one hand like a flag of truce. Detective Ruiz, square jaw, end-of-shift eyes, flipped a notebook. Another officer held a plastic evidence bag half full of dried leaves and a glint of green. "Mrs. Carter?" Ruiz asked. "You're the homeowner Mr. Reed worked for yesterday." "Yes," Vanessa said, breath steadying. "He worked for me again today. He was on Mrs. Lynn's roof to clear debris at her request." The younger officer cleared his throat. "We found this in Mr. Reed's truck," he said, lifting the bag. Inside, nestled in crumpled shop towels, sat and glowed around a carved oval of jade. Mrs. Lynn gasped. "That's my mother's brooch." Vanessa's mouth went dry, but something hard set behind her ribs. "Then it was put there," she said. "He didn't take it." The room shifted by a hair. Ruiz's pen paused. "You sound certain." "I'm observant," Vanessa said. "He frames a child's drawing. He labels his paint cans with dates and codes. He doesn't shove a brooch into waxed rags like a crow, and he doesn't carry leaves into a truck he keeps cleaner than my pantry. Who called you?" "Anonymous," the younger officer said, eyes skittering. "Doorbell video flagged a black pickup yesterday on Ash Lane." "Lots of black pickups in Connecticut," Vanessa replied. "Find a video with hands, not shadows." The front door opened, and Marcus stepped in, flanked by a 3rd officer, hands visible, posture composed. "Mr. Reed," Ruiz said, "we'd like to ask you some questions." Marcus's gaze flicked to Mrs. Lynn. She looked stricken. He softened. "We'll sort it," he told her, not as performance but as duty. To Ruiz, he said, "I'll cooperate." They asked where he'd been at noon, who had access to his truck. whether he'd entered the house. He answered cleanly. Twice he narrated his hands when he reached for his wallet. Twice Vanessa swallowed rage at the ritual of making yourself smaller to be safe. Ruiz glanced at the bag again. We're going to need you to come down to the station while we review statements. Mrs. Lynn gripped Vanessa's sleeve. He didn't do this, she whispered, voice paper thin. I asked him to check attic because water spot. I gave him key. I'm going too, Vanessa said. I watched him yesterday. I watched him today. I have eyes. Marcus met her gaze then, gratitude moving like a quiet current under the surface. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. She realized how often she'd been thanked for doing the bare minimum, for performing decency. This, she thought, is the floor, not the ceiling. At the station, the fluorescent lights hummed a tired song. Ruiz ushered Marcus into an interview room, then asked Vanessa to wait. Plastic chairs made every worry feel noisier. A TV mounted too high flicked through a local news loop. A receptionist chewed the same piece of gum like a vow. Vanessa texted Lily. At the police station. They found Mrs. Lynn's brooch in Marcus's truck. It's wrong. I know it's wrong. Lily. Go on the record. Don't hedge. Fear isn't wisdom. Vanessa lifted her chin and asked for Detective Ruiz. When he came, she said, you should pull footage from the neighbour's corner cam. I've seen the angle, catches Mrs. Lynn's walkway, and check the HOA cameras by the pool lot exit. Anyone with a fob key logged after noon? Also ask the anonymous caller for the timestamp. Patricia mentioned last night's theft, not noon today. Someone is laundering last night's fear to pay for today's accusation. Ruiz studied her. You a lawyer? A mother, she said, and I'm tired of outsourcing my judgment. He scribbled, nodded once, and walked away. Vanessa sat back, hands steady on her knees. On the opposite wall, a corkboard held lost dogs, a blood drive flyer, a cartoon about coffee. The everydayness of it registered like mercy. She pictured Sophie at home, Marcus smudges on her fingers, the framed drawing on the step. She pictured Marcus labelling a can, Mrs. Lynn's careful hands folding dumpling pleats on a Sunday. She pictured Patricia's platter of snickerdoodles. When Ruiz returned, his mouth held the shape of news not ready to be spoken. He gestured toward the interview rooms. We're pulling footage, he said. I'll need your statement now. Vanessa stood. Good, she said, and followed him down the hallway, each step feeling less like performance and more like a choice she should have made a long time ago. Detective Ruiz's office smelled faintly of burnt coffee and ink. Vanessa sat in the stiff chair, her palms pressed flat on her skirt, pulse thudding in her ears. The detective leaned against his desk, flipping to a fresh page in his notebook. Tell me everything you observed about Marcus Reed over the last 2 days, he said. She swallowed and forced herself not to hedge. He worked at my house yesterday and today, punctual, prepared, organised. He framed my daughter's drawing. He cleared an old man's storm drain, mended my deck rail, helped Mrs. Lynn with her roof. He never once crossed a boundary I didn't set, and I watched him. He takes pride in detail. He doesn't shove jewellery in a rag. He's not careless, not sloppy. Someone wants him to look guilty. Ruiz's eyes narrowed in concentration. Why are you so certain? Because I've lived with men who wear masks. My ex-husband could smile while gutting a room with words. Marcus isn't masked. He's open. Her voice caught, and because my daughter trusts him. Kids smell truth faster than we do. The detective scribbled. A beat of silence, then. The HOA cameras confirm what you suggested. At 12:16, a woman in a floral blouse was caught near Mrs. Lynn's side yard. Matches Patricia Haynes's outfit in her own doorbell footage. Vanessa's chest tightened. Patricia. She phoned in the anonymous tip too. We traced the call, Ruiz said. I can't ignore that, but the jewellery was still in his truck. Which means she planted it, Vanessa shot back. Patricia was circling my house yesterday, warning me about Marcus. She's been pushing fear into everyone's veins for months. She had motive. Keep her picture-perfect control. Keep us suspicious. Ruiz didn't argue. He just nodded, pen tapping once against the page. We'll process the evidence. In the meantime, Mr. Reed stays here. Procedure. Vanessa's stomach clenched. She thought of Marcus sitting alone under fluorescent lights, shoulders square but weary. He had carried himself with patience through every slight, every stare, every loaded pause. But patience didn't erase harm. Can I see him? She asked. Ruiz hesitated, briefly. The interview room was colder than the lobby, a rectangle of cinder block and hum. Marcus sat at the table, forearms resting on the steel, posture composed. His eyes lifted when the door opened, and relief flickered across them, quick, restrained, but real. "They're letting you back here?" he asked. Ruiz said a minute. She sat opposite, the chair groaning. "They found footage, Patricia in Mrs. Lynn's yard." His jaw ticked once. "That tracks. I told them you didn't do it," she said, her voice sharper than intended. "I told them I'd seen you, that none of this fits. I don't care what was in that truck. Someone put it there." Marcus studied her, quiet. At last, he said, "Most folks would have stayed silent. Safer that way." "Safe doesn't mean right," she whispered. The air between them pressed heavier than the walls. Vanessa wanted to reach across the table, to break the formality of procedure. But she held still, sensing the cost of careless gestures in rooms like this. "You okay?" she asked. His mouth curved, tired but steady. "I've been in tighter corners. Doesn't mean it's easy." The door opened again. Ruiz stood there. "Time." Vanessa rose reluctantly. "I'll wait until you walk out. However long it takes." Marcus inclined his head. "Then I'll see you soon." Hours stretched. Vanessa paced the waiting area until Sophie's babysitter texted she'd tucked the girl into bed. She typed back gratitude, then stared at the tiled floor, too restless to sit. When Ruiz finally emerged near midnight, his expression had shifted, grim but resolved. Security cam footage clears him. The jewellery had Patricia's prints, not his. We're releasing him. Relief loosened Vanessa's knees. Thank God. Ruiz tucked the notebook under his arm. "You should prepare yourself. Neighbours will talk. Patricia's already spinning it, says she was planting evidence as a test." "A test?" Vanessa's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Of what? How fast a community will condemn a black man for existing." Ruiz gave her a weary look. "Not my first rodeo, Miss Carter, but not my decision what the HOA gossips decide." The door opened, and Marcus stepped out, back straight, face calm, though fatigue tugged at his eyes. Vanessa moved toward him without thinking. "You're free." "So I am," he said softly. "For now." She searched his face, wanting to say more, but words knotted. Finally, "Come home with me. Just for coffee, please." His brows lifted slightly, but he nodded. The house was dark, except for the kitchen lamp she'd left on. Vanessa brewed coffee with hands that trembled less once the smell filled the air. Marcus leaned against the counter, quiet, letting her move. "You don't owe me this," he said finally. "I don't," she agreed, setting mugs down, "but I want to." They drank in silence for a while, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Finally, Vanessa set her cup down with a click. "Can I ask you something personal?" He met her gaze steadily. "Go ahead. Why are you still single?" The question burst out again, this time edged with the weight of everything that had happened. Marcus didn't look away. His eyes were dark and open, carrying both exhaustion and honesty. "Because I refuse to live a half-truth. I've seen what it does to people, pretending, settling, hiding pieces of themselves to fit someone else's comfort. I'd rather stand alone with my dignity intact than sit in a house built on fear." Vanessa exhaled shakily. "That sounds familiar." His smile was faint but real. "What about you?" She swallowed. "Because I forgot who I was. I built a life around appearances, keeping the right lawn, the right car, the right silence. But silence eats you alive. Tonight, I realized I don't want Sophie to inherit my fear. I don't want her to believe kindness is suspicious. I don't want her to see me too afraid to trust a good man." Marcus's gaze softened. "You think I'm a good man?" "I know it." The words shocked her with their certainty. For the first time all day, the corner of his mouth lifted in something like relief. Then maybe it was worth it. Vanessa frowned. Worth what? He gestured vaguely toward the memory of the interview room. All of it. If it cracked something open. Her throat tightened. She thought of Patricia's whispers, her mother's warnings, the HOA texts, each a link in the chain she'd been dragging. Tonight, for once, she dropped it. The clock ticked softly. Sophie stirred upstairs, then settled. Vanessa and Marcus stood in the kitchen, 2 mugs cooling on the counter, silence folding around them, not as distance, but as possibility. Outside, Maple Ridge slept in manicured rows, but inside, something had shifted beyond repair, something that felt, for the first time, like freedom. 1,000 words, Part 3. Morning remade the kitchen into something gentler, steam ribboning from the kettle, sunlight catching the edge of the framed drawing Marcus had left on the counter. Vanessa stood barefoot, hands wrapped around a mug, replaying the way his voice had steadied her last night, the way her own words had surprised her by being true. Upstairs, Sophie thumped from bed to bathroom to closet. She liked to narrate outfits to her stuffed rabbit, and this morning the rabbit got an earful about forward positions and tomato plants. The group text lit up before 8. Emergency HOA meeting tonight, 7 p.m, community room. Patricia had added a note. Recent incidents require clear standards for neighborhood safety. Vanessa stared at the notification until the letters lost shape. Safety as a cudgel. Safety as a word you could put in your mouth to hide the taste of bias. She typed to Lily, "They're circling wagons." Lily replied with a single word that made Vanessa bark a laugh. "Uncircle." On her way to drop Sophie at school, Vanessa swung by Mrs. Lynn's. The elderly woman opened the door with a tremble held in check by stubbornness. Her floral blouse had tiny red peonies scattered across it like punctuation. "Come in," she said. "I made ginger tea. I did not sleep." They sat at the tiny kitchen table while the kettle sighed. The counters were tidy. The only mess was a scatter of screws and a screwdriver near the sink, as if Mrs. Lynn had been preparing to fix something the world had broken. "They let him go," Vanessa said gently. Mrs. Lynn nodded, lips tight. "They told me about Patricia. I have known that woman 15 years, always smiling. Smiles can be sharp." She looked up, eyes bright. "I am ashamed I let them go through my things without saying louder. He didn't do it." "You said enough," Vanessa answered. "And today we'll say more." "Today," Mrs. Lynn repeated, and it sounded like a vow. By afternoon, the cul-de-sac hummed with ordinary business, the trash truck clanging its way down the lane, a dog chasing its own decision-making in loops, but everything felt sharpened, as if the edges of Maple Ridge had finally stopped pretending to be soft. At 2, the black pickup pulled into Vanessa's driveway. She met Marcus at the gate before he could knock. "I wanted to see how the rail held," he said, holding up a small tin of stain. "You don't owe me a service call, but my grandmother would haunt me if I let a job settle without checking it." Vanessa opened the gate. "Come in before we collect any more ghosts." They moved to the deck together, the silence between them easy like shared work. Marcus brushed a thin line of stain over the sanded edge, and the repair disappeared into the hole. No seam, no scar, just a choice made right. "There's an HOA meeting tonight." Vanessa said finally. "Patricia called it. Safety." He glanced up. "You going?" "I am." "You want me there?" "Yes," she said, surprised by how certain it felt. "Not because I need you to validate me, because they need to see who they've been talking about like you're a rumor." He considered that, then nodded. "I'll stand where you need me to stand, or not stand at all. Your call." "You're not a tool," Vanessa said, the words sharper than she intended. "You don't get slotted where you're useful and trundled back to the garage when you're not." His smile was small and honest. "Noted." Sophie barreled through the back door with the force of a weather pattern. "Mr. Marcus, coach says if I aim at the low corner, the goalie hates it." "Goalies hate everything that works," he said gravely. "Show me your plant foot." They spent 20 minutes on the patch of grass beyond the deck, Marcus doing the most tender kind of coaching, short sentences, clear praise, practical corrections. Vanessa watched her daughter's body learn certainty, watched the way Marcus let kids be complicated and capable at the same time. She wanted to bottle it, the ease of it, the way a Thursday afternoon could carry a lesson nobody wrote on a whiteboard. This is what care looks like when it doesn't announce itself. At 6:45, the community room buzzed like a beehive. Folding chairs, a long table up front with pitchers of water and a plate of cookies that looked like pennants. Patricia stood at the centre in a navy blazer, HOA binder open, expression arranged to communicate both concern and competence. People drifted to seats in pairs, then threes. Mr. Green limped in and set his cane gently against a chair. Mrs. Lynn walked in slowly and sat near the aisle, hands folded like prayer and strategy at once. When Marcus entered beside Vanessa, the air thinned by a half-breath. Heads turned, the way trees turn to a wind they've been pretending not to feel. Vanessa felt the old urge to make herself smaller, to apologize for taking up a row with a truth that made people itch. She kept walking. Patricia tapped the microphone as if to bless it. "Thank you for coming on short notice. We all cherish Maple Ridge. It is our duty to protect it. Recent events, reveal how vulnerable we are to individuals we do not know. Vanessa's fingers tightened on the strap of her bag. She stood before she could think herself into politeness. "I'd like to speak after you," she said, voice steady. Patricia blinked. "We'll open the floor at the end for questions." "It's not a question," Vanessa replied. "It's a correction." A murmur rolled through the room, a small wave breaking where it could. Patricia cleared her throat. "As I was saying, were you going to mention," Vanessa said, not loudly but with the precision of a scalpel, "that the police cleared Marcus Reed? That footage shows you near Mrs. Lynn's yard at the time you claim her brooch disappeared, that your finger oils were on the jewellery they found in his truck." A chair scraped. Someone coughed. Patricia's smile did something brittle. "I was conducting a controlled test," she said. "We've had thefts. I needed to confirm our vulnerabilities." Mrs. Lynn stood, small and fierce. "You used my dead mother's brooch as a prop," she said. The words landed like stones. "You used my neighbour as a suspect because he is easy to suspect. That is not a test. That is a trap. For him, for your soul." Patricia's face flushed a complicated red. This is highly irregular." "Fear is irregular," Mr. Green said from his chair without standing, voice rough with gravel and certainty. "And when it's all you water, it grows like crabgrass. The man cleared my drain. He's been kinder to this street than half of us with our flags and committee minutes." Silence dropped, heavy and clarifying. Vanessa felt it gather them, a community finally hearing itself. She stepped forward to the table and turned to the room. "I was afraid of everything after my divorce," she said. "And I let that fear get names and faces it didn't earn. Yesterday I told a good man not to talk to my daughter because I was protecting her from a story I'd built out of other people's whispers. Last night I watched that same good man sit alone in a room under buzzing lights because our neighbourhood would rather be comforted by suspicion than uncomfortable with its own heart." She took a breath. "Truth, less air. I'm done. With performance. With HOA emails that use safety to mean control. With the idea that belonging is a prize someone else gives you. If you want to protect something here, protect our capacity to see each other's actions. Protect our children's ability to assume kindness before condemnation. Protect the good in front of you." She looked toward Marcus. He did not nod or give her a signal. He simply stood there, whole, not asking for permission to exist. Patricia shuffled papers. "Our bylaws. Your bylaws can survive a policy that says don't call the police on your neighbour because you've replaced your imagination with a ring cam still," Vanessa said. "They can survive requiring evidence before accusation. And while we're at it, they can make space for a block party where people talk to each other with their mouths, not their group chats." Laughter burst from somewhere unexpected and spread, relief disguised as humour. Hands went up. A man in a checked shirt said he'd coached youth baseball with Marcus's cousin. Good people. A woman from 2 streets over confessed she'd crossed the street last week to avoid a delivery driver and hated herself for it. Mrs. Lynn raised a shaky hand and proposed a good neighbour fund. Cash and time pooled to help seniors with repairs so no one had to choose between pride and a roof. Ruiz stood quietly in the back, arms crossed, not speaking, but his presence steadied the room like a level on a crooked shelf. Patricia's face pinched at the edges, but she was nothing if not a survivor of reputational weather. "We can form a subcommittee," she managed. "Draft language." "Tonight," Vanessa said, "not next season. Fear loves delay." By the time the meeting bled into logistics, a sign-up sheet had appeared from someone's tote bag, names filled lines, volunteers for chairs and tables, for grills, for music. A teenager offered to DJ if someone covered cables. Mr. Green, dry as a New England joke, offered to judge pies. When it was over, people drifted like ships unmoored from a storm. Some came to Marcus with cautious apologies. He accepted the ones that were sincere and let the performances dissolve in air. Vanessa didn't translate for him or stand in front of him like a shield. She simply stood beside him, her hand near his, not touching, presence as decision. Outside under the parking lot light, she turned to him. "Thank you for coming." "You didn't need me," he said. "I wanted you," she answered, and watched the words land. They didn't explode, they opened. He looked at her as if the whole day had drawn a line between 2 lives, and now they had to decide which side to stand on. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'm building a small raised bed for Mrs. Lynn. She wants herbs. You and Sophie should come by. We can put tomatoes and truth in the ground and see what grows." Vanessa smiled, and it felt like a light turning on in a room she had boarded up. "We'll bring basil," she said, "and lemonade. And if you don't mind, I'll bring the drill. I'd like to remember how it feels in my hands." Saturday arrived with a sky so blue it looked newly painted, the kind of morning that made Maple Ridge smell like cut grass and porch coffee. Vanessa and Sophie hauled a bag of potting soil from the trunk, while Marcus measured the rectangle he'd staked in Mrs. Lynn's side yard. He'd brought cedar boards and corner brackets, a spool of twine to keep lines true, and a little cardboard template for spacing. He worked without hurry, and somehow the absence of hurry made everything move faster. Sophie dragged a rake half her size. "Where should we put the tomatoes?" "Front row," Marcus said. "They like to show off. Basil in the corners protects them from bugs and makes them taste like summer." Mrs. Lynn shuffled out with a sun hat and a tray of seedlings. "Cilantro, too," she said, "for dumplings." Then, softer to Marcus, "Thank you." "You're doing this," he said. "I'm just stubborn with a drill." Vanessa laughed and lifted the bag of soil. The weight pulled at her arms in a good way, work reminding her she had muscles. The boards came together with quick, stuttering whirs of the drill. The wood smelled clean and green when he cut it. He handed Vanessa a handful of screws without looking. She was already there with the right size bit. They moved in an easy loop of attention. Measure, cut, pass, steady, drive, like a language they'd always known and only just remembered to speak. By mid-morning, neighbours began to trickle past. Mr. Green arrived with a folding chair and a container of rusty nails he insisted were lucky for fences. A teen with headphones propped a bike against the curb and asked if they needed help lugging soil. Even Patricia came, fingers tight around a Tupperware of deviled eggs like a shield she'd forgotten to polish. She hovered at the edge of the yard. "I made these for the group." Her voice wobbled, and for the first time it wasn't practiced. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lynn. And you, Mr. Reed. I told myself I was protecting the neighbourhood. I was protecting my reputation for being the protector. That's not protection. It's vanity." She swallowed. "I'll step down as HOA president. Someone with better sight should lead." Mrs. Lynn glanced at the deviled eggs, then at Patricia's shaking hands. "Leadership starts over all the time," she said. "Today you carry boards. That is enough." Patricia nodded, blinking, then tucked her blazer sleeves and lifted the end of a cedar plank like she'd been waiting to be told what to do in a way that mattered. They filled the frame with soil, dark and loamy, the smell of it cutting through the old pretense like rain through dust. Marcus showed Sophie how to make a small well for each seedling, how to firm the dirt without crushing roots. Vanessa pressed basil into the corners and set the tomatoes along the front as instructed. When they finished, the rectangle looked like a quiet promise. "Water," Marcus said, and Sophie sprinted for the hose. She held the sprayer like a microphone. "This is Maple Ridge News," she announced, "and today we're watering truth." The adults laughed, some with surprise, some with relief. Water arced and fell. The leaves trembled and brightened. A table appeared from someone's garage, then another from someone else's. Lemonade pitchers, iced tea, a plate of cookies from a child who'd been taught to offer, not to perform. Vanessa's mother texted, "Heard about the meeting." "Are you okay?" Vanessa stared at the message a long moment, then typed, "I'm better than okay. Come by if you want to see what better looks like." She hit send before she could edit herself back into the daughter her mother preferred. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and looked at the bed. "Herbs by the step," he said, "so Mrs. Lynn doesn't have to reach far." He knelt to adjust a stone, and when he stood, Vanessa caught the small wince he didn't bother to hide. "You haven't eaten," she said. He shrugged. "Mentors forget lunch." "Then I'm mentoring you to my kitchen," she answered. 10 minutes. Pile a plate. Come back and pretend it's a break." He tipped his head. "That your drill talking?" "It's my grandmother," she said, surprising herself with the instinct to claim a wisdom line that belonged to her too. She would have said, "If your hands can feed a man who spent a night under fluorescent lights because people let fear steer, then do it." They went inside. The house held traces of the morning. Sophie's sneakers by the door, the framed drawing on the counter, the lemon rinds in the sink. Vanessa pulled leftovers from the fridge, warmed a plate, slid it in front of him. He ate with the short efficiency of someone who had learned not to leave good food waiting. She poured water and leaned against the counter, watching his shoulders loosen. "Last night," she said, "when I asked why you're still single, I was really asking if there's room for someone like me to try again without pretending." He set down his fork, careful with the space between them. "There's room," he said, "but there's no mask closet. If we do this, it's you and me and the kid and the days when the neighborhood remembers it's a neighborhood, and the days it forgets." "I don't want a closet," she said. "I want a porch." He laughed, small, startled. "A porch is a good start." They stood there, two people with a kitchen between them and a garden outside that demanded water and patience. Vanessa stepped closer. "I like you," she said, simple, uncamouflaged. "Not because you fixed my wall or my deck or my street, because you make me honest enough to fix myself." He didn't touch her hands. He didn't crowd the moment. He let the words sit until they grew roots. "I like you," he said, mirroring her courage. "Not because you stood up for me at a microphone, though I won't forget it. Because you dropped your chain and didn't go back to pick it up, even when it rattled." The screen door creaked. Sophie leaned in, hair haloed with sun. "Mom? Mr. Marcus? Mrs. Lynn said we can plant strawberries if we make another box." Vanessa smiled. "We're coming." They carried plates to the sink and went back outside. Afternoon unspooled into the kind of day people think they move to neighborhoods for but rarely earn. Children chasing each other between lawn chairs. Mr. Green telling a story that stretched and stretched until it became the truth of how he felt. Mrs. Lynn teaching a teen how to pinch basil without bruising it. Patricia stood beside Vanessa and asked, quietly, if Vanessa would run for HOA president. Vanessa shook her head and pointed to Mrs. Lynn, who was drawing a map of shade and sun on a scrap of cardboard. "Her site," she said. "Let's follow it." By evening, the bed was planted and labelled with popsicle sticks. Marcus found a scrap of cedar and carved the words Lynn's Kitchen with a pocket knife that had seen more years than his truck. He set it at the corner and everyone applauded as if naming could make something permanent. Maybe it could. As the last neighbours drifted home, Vanessa's mother's sedan turned the corner and slowed. She parked at the curb, sat a moment, then got out and walked over, heels finding their way through grass and dirt. She seemed smaller outdoors, softer without a foyer to echo in. "I was wrong," she said without preamble, eyes on the raised bed instead of Vanessa's face. "About a lot of things, what safety is, what strength looks like." She breathed, the exhale a surrender. "Hello, Marcus, I'm Margaret." He nodded. "Nice to meet you." She nodded back, then turned to Vanessa. "Do you need anything?" Vanessa reached for her hand, surprised by how easily it happened. "We have what we need, but you can help us water." She guided her mother to the hose. Margaret smiled, a little shaky, and turned the nozzle. Water arced again, the leaves trembled again, the dirt darkened and drank. Dusk layered itself over Maple Ridge in slow blues and lavender. Lights winked on in kitchens, a dog barked twice and quieted, somewhere a television started a ball game. Marcus packed his tools. Sophie asked if he could stay for a movie. He looked to Vanessa. "Popcorn?" she asked. "With extra butter," he bargained. They settled on the couch later, Sophie between them, with a bowl the size of a drum. Halfway through the movie, Sophie's head landed on Marcus's shoulder like it had always known where to go. He kept his arms still as a shelf. Vanessa watched them and felt something inside her reorder itself around this simple geometry. 3 people, a couch, a bowl, an evening that had room for tomorrow. When the credits rolled and Sophie sleepwalked up the stairs, Vanessa walked Marcus to the door. The night smelled like cut basil and late summer. The garage wall caught a wash of porch light, the slate colour steady and calm. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll swing by to check the paint where the downspout meets the trim. And maybe, if you want, we can take Sophie to the park. There's a field with goals. Goalies hate the low corner." Vanessa smiled. "We'll bring a ball." She hesitated, then stepped forward and kissed his cheek. One quiet, packed, deliberate press. His breath caught almost imperceptibly, then steadied. "Good night, Vanessa," he said, voice low. "Good night, Marcus." He walked to the truck and paused with his hand on the door. The framed drawing of the ladder and the truck with eyelashes still sat on his dash. He tapped the glass twice with 2 fingers, the same way he had before, then looked back at her. She raised a hand. He raised his. When he drove away, the taillights disappeared at the end of the street, and Maple Ridge exhaled. Vanessa closed the door, leaned her back against it, and let the quiet hold her. She thought of primer and coats and finishes, of seeds tucked into soil, of the way truth took less air. She thought of fear losing its microphone. Upstairs, Sophie murmured in her sleep. Outside, the raised bed kept its small night watch, and inside, a woman who had once mastered the art of pretending stood barefoot in her own home and felt exactly gloriously unafraid.